Animation in 3ds Max, a series of specially constructed courses meant to be followed in sequence and interspersed with valuable exercises to reinforce learned concepts. In this volume, we'll build on the concepts covered in Volume 1. We'll start by learning how to animate with constraints. We'll then learn about path animation, and to conclude the course, we'll delve deeper into the curve editor, learning more about the amazing tools it offers to help bring our work to the next level. These courses are designed to be taken in sequence, so we really encourage you to start with Volume 1 before continuing with this section. We also encourage you to take advantage of the assignments that follow each volume. These assignments will allow you to take what you've learned and apply those tools and techniques to your own to a controlling object. And we can animate that relationship as well, how much influence the constraint has over the constrained object. Let's go and have a look at this scene. I'll start back from the beginning and hit play. As you can see, our UFO lands, but then it does not take off with the platform. So let's go ahead and finish this scene out with a few constraints and a few keyframes. So the first thing we need to do is decide when the platform should control the UFO. Let's go ahead and scrub through slowly. We'll search for the moment when there's no movement from the UFO nor platform, and that happens on about frame 56. Sweet, so this would be a great time to constrain our UFO then. Let's go ahead and grab its control, and from there, we'll head over to our animation menu, we'll choose constraints, and we'll start with a position constraint that will lock down the translation of our UFO to follow the position of our platform. So we're going to grab that, and now we need to choose the object that we'd like to constrain to. So let's go and grab the platform's control and take a look at what has happened. You'll notice that the object has shifted to the position of the platform. You'll also notice that an extra controller has been added. For the position constraints, we can access its properties. This is really important because we'll eventually need to animate not only the weight of this controller, but the controller above it, just to make sure that we still have some animation here. As you can see, the animation is being blocked now because of the constraint. So no longer do we see any movement at all. It doesn't fly down any longer because of this controller. But we'll go ahead and change that soon. Now, before we change that, you do realize the UFO is within the platform, right? We need to go ahead and fix this. So let me go ahead and show you something. If we were to go ahead and focus in on the position constraints properties, let's make sure we're under our position list to do that. You'll notice that we have this really cool option called Keep Initial Offset. When we turn that on, 3ds Max is going to remember the offset that the UFO had initially before the constraint was applied. So wherever we have constrained the object, it's going to pop back to that same position. Alright, sweet. So now if we were to go ahead and continue scrubbing, you'll notice that the UFO will start to follow the position of our platform. That's great, but it doesn't follow the orientation. That actually looks pretty cool. But anyway, staying focused, let's say we now go ahead and apply a rotation constraint, and then we'll animate the weight of both constraints so that we can finish out our project. Let's go ahead and head back over to our animation menu with our control selected. We'll go to constraints, and this time we'll grab the rotation constraint known as the orientation constraint. Wonderful. Let's go ahead and add that to our platform and take a look. Again, it has shifted simply because of the fact that the orientation differs between the two objects. No worries. Let's go ahead and turn on Keep Initial Offset. So this time we have to go to our rotation list to do that. Here it is. Fantastic. Now all is well. Sweet. So to finish this up, we now need to go ahead and animate the weight of the constraint itself. We need to make sure that the weight will turn off at the right moment so that the UFO can land, and then we'll have it turn back on when we're ready to have the platform take full control. So in order to do this, we'd want to jump to our curve editor. Let's go ahead and right click and choose the curve editor. I'll go ahead and bring this over. And we're searching for our position and rotation weights. So here is where we find our position weight. Alright, sweet. And here is the constraint. So here's what we can do. With the weight position constraint track selected, we can now right click and choose add keys. And let's say we go ahead and add a keyframe right here on frame 57. Nice. You can see 3ds Max has also added a keyframe at the very beginning of the animation. Wonderful. So with this key there, you'll notice that its value is set to 100%. That's great. Now we just need to make sure that we create another keyframe just before it. And this keyframe's weight should be set to 0 because the platform should only control the UFO at the end of the animation. So let's go ahead and grab that key that we just added. Let's go ahead and right click and choose Move Keys. Let's go ahead and set its weight to 0. Alright, wonderful. Let's see what happens now to the animation. If we were to go ahead and start back from the beginning and hit play. Alright, so as you can see, we're getting there, right? You'll notice that we're starting to see some of the animation that we had early on before the constraint was applied. How come we don't see all of it? Well, let's go ahead and jump back to the curve editor. You'll notice that we did set the key on frame 54 to a value of 0, right? But take a look, we also have a key at the very beginning of the animation that we'll need to set to 0. Let's go ahead and do that. And now watch this. You'll notice that when we play through the animation, now we're able to see the position of our UFO follow its keyframes. And then at a certain point, it'll look to the constraint to figure out what happens next. How awesome is that? So we need to do the same thing for our rotation track to finish up. Let's go ahead and find the orientation constraint. Here it is. Alright, sweet. So as we've done before, we can go to about 56 or 57. I think 57 will work. We use that for our position constraint. I'll go ahead and right click and I'll choose Add Keys. And we'll click. That's at 100%. Let's go ahead and click just before that to create another key. Nice. Now we can right click and choose Move Keys. We'll go ahead and grab the first two keys. That should be at a weight of 0, and we'll go ahead and set it to that. And now we'll go ahead and play back the animation. So there you have it. So now the UFO lands, and then it starts to be controlled by the platform at the right moment. How awesome. So in this lesson, we learned about constraints. We learned what they do. We also learned how to animate with constraints. Also, that we can attach objects at the right moment and fulfill the needs of our scene to add more realism to our work, simply because in real life, things move in an arcing pattern, right? Take, for example, an arm in a walk cycle. If you were to go ahead and track that arm, you would notice an arc in that arm's path of action. So therefore, we need to make sure that the objects we animate have arcs as well. Now, they don't necessarily always have to be perfect arcs. Sometimes arcs are pretty sharp, but there is still some curvature there. And it really takes just studying life to figure out how to animate arcs just right, because it differs per shot. But let's say we go ahead and take a look at the animation in this scene. I'll go ahead and hit play. And as you can see, the UFO is landing. It has changed slightly. You can see that there's a pretty bad drop. The arc needs to be improved at the beginning of the animation. I'm using this asset also for another really important discussion here. You'll notice that if we were to go ahead and try to move the UFO, we cannot. Why is that? Well, let's go ahead and take a closer look at our motion panel. So as of right now, you can see the position constraint is still controlling the position of this object, even though its weight is set to 0 so that the UFO can land. So in order for us to get control back over our UFO, we basically need to reactivate the 0 position list. We need to go ahead and double click to activate it, and now we're able to move our UFO. So keep that in mind. Remember, once you add a new controller, that's going to control the object that it was added to. Alright, so now once we double click on our 0 position list, we're able to fix the arc in this animation. Alright, sweet. So let's say we go ahead and get to it. How do we see an object's trajectory or its path of action? Well, with it selected, we can go to our motion panel and we can switch over to trajectories mode. And here we have it. So now watch this. Let's go ahead and turn on auto key. We can now go in and start to make changes here, and we can see them on the fly. How neat is that? And then Max takes it a step further. We could actually edit these keyframes that we see on our path. So watch this. If we were to go to our sub-object level, we now have access to our keyframes. We can go ahead and select our key right here that's giving us the trouble, and we could start to adjust it so that we can improve the quality of our arcs. How cool is that? Awesome stuff. Now, you also notice the smaller dots. These represent our spacing. So as our dots get closer and closer together, that means that the animation is moving slower. But as they get further and further apart, the animation starts to pick up speed. And you can see that in the beginning of the animation. So if I were to go ahead and hit play, you'll notice that is certainly true. As it starts to descend, you notice that it moves a little bit slower at the beginning, but then when it finally reaches the platform, it kind of picks up speed just a little bit, right? Sweet. So that has to do with our spacing then. So we can experiment here. We can go ahead and take this key and start to kind of drag that to even out our spacing a bit more. So we can drag it down just a bit more. Let's hit play. Much better. Another thing you might even try is optimization. You might consider removing that keyframe. So I just hit delete on the keyboard to clear it out. When we hit play, it looks much smoother. Fantastic stuff. So in this lesson, we learned how to improve our arcs with the trajectories tool. We also learned that sometimes we may need to switch our controllers if we're trying to animate on an object that has a new controller, perhaps a constraint that's blocking that connection, blocking us from having to create keyframes. So sometimes you might have to switch to the controller before if you decide on making any corrections. But that's it for this lesson. And in the still the same here with path animation, only this time we create the path the object should travel along. So this is highly useful then for vehicles, let's say an aircraft or perhaps a car or truck that needs to drive through our set. Let's go and have a look at how this works. We'll jump to one of our side views, let's say the right view. Nice. Then from there, we'll go to our Create panel, and underneath Shapes, we'll find the Line tool. So we'll use this to create our spline that our UFO will be connected to. I'll go ahead and start by creating a rough shape. So it's going to be very linear, and then I'll show you how to convert this to a smooth spline. Alright, sweet. So here we have a few points. I'm going to right click twice to exit the tool. Nice. From there we can go ahead and press the P key to jump back to our perspective view. And then with the curve still selected, you can go to your vertex sub-object level. You can use this to reshape the spline a bit more. So I might go ahead and have it curve over to the side just to make this more interesting, so it just doesn't fly straight. Sweet. And now, to smooth out its form, we could just go ahead and grab all of our points, right click, and choose Bezier. And take a look, we're given tangent handles that we can use to adjust the interpolation of our spline even further. So we can start to get our rotate gizmo involved and use that to round out the shape a bit more. You can also scale your tangents as well. Really neat stuff. So I'll make a few more tweaks before we constrain our UFO. Let's make sure that it will fly at a nice angle. I think that'll work out well. Let me go ahead and check this last point. I might go ahead and take the rotate gizmo here and kind of rotate that over to the side in the Z-axis a bit more to smooth this out. And there we have it. So now to constrain the object, it's just a matter of grabbing the object to constrain first. And then we can head over to our animation menu we choose Constraints, and we'll grab the Path constraint. Now it's time to choose the path, and there we have it. You'll notice that 3ds Max is not only going to constrain the object to the path, but it's also going to create an animation for you. You'll notice that the animation will start on frame 0, which is the default start time in Max, and it will continue through all the way to the end of your active time segment. So if our range was from 0 to 40, our last key would be created there. Nice. Let's go ahead and hit play to have a look at the timing. So you can see it's very slow right now. If you would like, you can always go ahead and take this last keyframe and slide it forward, maybe to about frame 30, just to make this more exciting. Let's go ahead and hit play. Alright, sweet. I could also speed it up even more, let's say to about frame 20. I'll go ahead and place the last key there. That's cool. So it really depends on the timing you want, but note that you can change this easily. Also, let's go ahead and have a close look at our path constraint properties. We can access them from the position list, which brings up an interesting point. Let me go ahead and show you something. If I were to go ahead and scroll down and turn on follow, you'll notice that the UFO is now going to be oriented along the tangency of our spline. However, watch this. If we were to go ahead and grab our rotate gizmo, you'll notice that we can freely animate rotation here, which makes this a super advanced constraint. The fact that even though this object is oriented to follow its path, we still have control over this object's orientation. Really neat stuff. Cool, and then you'll also notice that you can go ahead and turn on banking, so as it moves along the path, we can have that automatically bank. And we can control the bank amount to have that bank a bit more. And if that banking action is too rough, you could always just go ahead and smooth it out with the smoothness property. Much better. Sweet. Now, what's not so cool is the fact that the UFO is pointed in the wrong direction. As of right now, if we were to go ahead and take a look at our settings, you can see the axis is set to the x-axis, but that's going to cause the UFO to move sideways. If we were to switch this to the z-axis instead, you can see that it's going to kind of tilt that to the side. So what's best here for our needs is the y-axis. You'll notice that with the y-axis chosen, it now flies in the right direction, which is a good thing. Unless it wants to do tricks, and then you can go ahead and have it fly sideways. Nothing wrong with that. And then if you ever need to, you could also flip the axis as well. So let's say if it needed to fly backwards. So in this case, it's doing that because I've now flipped the y-axis. Super cool. But that's a look at the path constraint. And then if you'd like to adjust it from, let's say, your curve editor, let me show you this. Go ahead and right click and grab the curve editor. We'll search for the constraint. Here's the percentage. So it goes from 0 to 100%, which means it's at the end of the path at that point on frame 20. Now if I were to go ahead and try to use any one of my tangent presets, you'll notice it will not work. And that's all to do with the type of controller that has been set on this property, this percentage track. So watch this. If we were to go ahead and right click, we could actually change that. We can go to Assign Controller. You can see by default it's a linear type. Let's go ahead and switch this to a Bezier type. Now when we choose OK, you can see that we have access to our tangents and we get this ease out and ease in effect. Let's go ahead and hit play. Alright, super cool. So it's going to ease out of the first key and ease into our last key. If you still want a constant speed as what we started with, you just go ahead and grab your keys and you can go ahead and set them to linear. And there you have it. But by doing it this way, you can convert them to any one of these tangent presets, as opposed to what we saw earlier when it was set to linear float. Well, we were stuck with that, right? But once you convert it to a Bezier float controller type, you have access to all of these. Awesome stuff. So again, in this lesson, we learned about path animation and how it can be used